So I guess just
Yeah,
first with the starting point, like who are you, Wayne?
yeah. So I'm Wayne Pacelle. I'm president of Animal Wellness Action, a 501(c)(4) organization devoted to advancing anti-cruelty to animals policies and then to see that those laws are enforced. I also am president of a group called the Center for a Humane Economy, and that group seeks to work with corporations to embed animal welfare sensibilities into their operations, whether it's R&D programs or their sourcing of products, commodities, um, and all of the other things that businesses do to affect nature and animals. And I'm the former CEO of the Humane Society of the United States. I was also CEO of another group called the Fund for Animals. So I've led
Wow.
animal welfare groups at the national level. I have worked to, help engineer and pass 100 federal laws and amendments on animal welfare in Congress, more than 1,500 state laws. I've run 45 statewide ballot initiatives, including measures in Ohio. I have I've negotiated 500 corporate agreements with Walmart, Giorgio Armani on fur, SeaWorld on no breeding of orcas, uh, you name it. So I've been steeped in the cause of animal welfare. I've written a couple of New York Times best-selling books, one called The Bond that talks about our human relationship with animals, and a second called The Humane Economy, which is how the combination of moral intention and human ingenuity is providing solutions that obviate the need for destruction of animals in nature.
Well, I'm talking to the right man today about this topic. I can't think of anyone better. That is very impressive, and I can see and hear this is a really mission-driven work for you. They've been dedicated to over and over across corporate and policy, et cetera. So that's really exciting. Agritecture, we're all about featuring, different stories across the food system. So that's the part of animal welfare I'd like to focus on, if you don't mind. So maybe you can paint us a picture about why is this a problem? What is the problem? Anything about the scale of the issue that can help us understand, maybe from a humane side that we often, I know me personally, we don't think about, most of us.
Yeah,
But you obviously have an ability to help us understand why this matters.
yeah. Well, Homo sapiens has been around for, at least a couple of 100,000 years. And one of the huge developments in the long arc of our prehistory and history is that we domesticated animals. And the first domesticated animal was the dog coming from the wolf.
Mm.
But then there were about 15 other species that were domesticated, including now what we think of as cattle, pigs, chickens, turkeys. And for thousands of years, those animals were raised for food. And there was a notion of animal husbandry, stewardship of the animals. Animals had access to pasture. They could feel sunlight on their backs and soil beneath their feet. And yes, all of those animals were going to die at some point, or many of them were going to die by slaughter, unless some other circumstance took their life prior to that. But not every day had to be one of misery. In the early 1960s, there were innovations in agriculture to jack up production. And there was a mass movement of animals from outdoor housing and life, living to these windowless large factory farms. And some of those factory farms were particularly intensive in terms of the forms of confinement. Not only were they confined in a large building, but they were crammed side by side in cages and crates that allowed their very efficient overcrowding. And the three most intensive systems were veal crates, 22-inch wide crates for a calf who lived about 20 weeks or so, and the animals were inhibited from moving, so they didn't develop muscle, so the meat would be tender. The more even serious practices were for breeding sows. The breeding sows are captured in a crate called the gestation crate. These are 400 to 500 pound sows. It's very large animals, and they're in crates that are 2 foot by 7 foot. So they can't turn around. They have no ability for any lateral movement. Their bulging sides are hitting both sides of the caging. And then they could maybe take, a quarter of a step or a half a step forward, maybe a half a step back. They have no, you know, opportunity to interact in a safe way with others of their kind, even though they're herd animals. And they would often obsessively bite the bars in front of them. And they would often, break their teeth and have other signs of psychological disorder from that incredible immobilizing strategy of keeping them. And then the other system was the confinement of laying hens in battery cages. These are small rectangular cages about the size of a large microwave, and 6 or 8 birds would be jammed into that space for 12 to 18 months without relief. So they were not able to extend their wings or at all. So I began to take this problem on in the late 1990s and tried to um, really think about creating a cage-free or a crate-free future in animal agriculture, and have run a bunch of ballot initiatives in Florida, Arizona, California, Massachusetts, and I had launched one with our team in Ohio 15 years ago and gathered 650,000 signatures to put a measure on the ballot to replicate Prop 2 that we had done in California in 2008. So the same year that Obama was elected to his first term, we had a measure on the ballot to allow animals to stand up, lie down, turn around, and freely extend their limbs. So hardly a radical manifesto of animal rights, just a basic standard of decency to give animals with legs and wings an opportunity to use them. So we gathered these signatures, and the Farm Bureau and the rest of the farm lobby were very upset about it. They organized politically to try to derail it. They didn't succeed, but at the end of the day, kind of the long and short of this is reached an accord with them to have a more extended phase out of some of these practices, in particular the gestation crates. And that just took effect in Ohio on January 1st, 2026. But there were 7 other elements of the agreement to advance animal welfare in Ohio, making cockfighting a felony offense and having a comprehensive prohibition on the set of activities associated with cockfighting, banning private ownership of large, dangerous wild animals. People have tigers, lions, great apes, other primates as pets or in a private menagerie. Never ends well for those animals. They always suffer as a consequence of this. To crack down on puppy mills, which are intensive confinement operations for breeding dogs, and then a series of other policies on animal welfare, many of them in the farm animal welfare space. So it's been a long journey, and over those 15 years, we went from maybe 3 to 4% of hens in the United States outside of these battery cages. Now it's at 46%. And for pigs, it was about 3 to 4% out of these gestation crates, the breeding sows, and now it's nearly 50% for the sows. So if you look at various metrics, we're demonstrably advancing animal welfare. And this is not perfection for these animals. It's not nirvana for them for sure. They're still going to be slaughtered, but at least they have a little bit of room to live.
Well, that is the news, and thank you for sharing that, and congratulations. I mean, I can only imagine the work it took, the stakeholder engagement, the writing, the dealing with other lobbyists that are fighting against this to get there. So really kudos to you. It's such an interesting topic I know so little about. I want to go back to the problem itself, right? So it sort of sounded like you were saying this technology developed. We've got all these consequences across our society from various revolutions in technology, the Industrial Revolution, its effect on pollution or urbanization. We've got this now the digital revolution. We've got suicide rates in teens. There's always a double-edged sword to technology, but that's only part of the story. There's something else behind it. There's a reason why technology is developed. There's other mechanisms. So I'm just curious to hear your perspective about like where do you think the root of this problem is? Is it that technology developed and we adopted it? Is it that, it's capitalism? Is it that it's
Mhm.
farmers not getting enough money because we're going for the cheapest product at the store? It's probably some combination of those, but I'm really curious to hear your perspective about what is the root of this issue um,
Yeah.
that has led to this, wide scale animal abuse across farm life.
Well, I think across the span of humanity, famine and food scarcity have always been a big theme of our experience. I
Mhm.
mean, it's really only in more contemporary times when we don't have consistent levels of food insecurity, although a subset of people certainly are food insecure.
Right.
So I would say, if you think about the 1930s and you think about the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, there was tremendous food scarcity. And I think the United States vowed to have agriculture be an engine of consistent supply of
Yeah.
food to Americans and, later to the whole world. And I think that this notion of hyperproductivity
Mhm.
became kind of a driving goal of our federal agriculture agency, the USDA, and it also became built into the corporate ethos of farming and to the individual ethic of farmers to contribute to productivity. And I think factory farming was an extreme manifestation of that, right? Where we reduced animals to meat, milk, and egg producing machines. We denied their essence as animals. We disregarded their sociable needs, their psychological well-being, and and frankly just fundamental welfare and wellness and well-being. And I think, clearly you can think of factory farming where you just have immense production by housing animals like wine bottles. And that is an example of innovation detached from conscience. I think my work is really about human innovation attached to conscience, that we need both kind of a moral purpose, but also the constant creativity of the human mind, the ingenuity of human beings in order to find solutions.
So interesting and so well said. And like innovation at all costs. I mean, isn't that what we're seeing now in a digital way that just really scares so many of us? And now you're giving this really astute example from history that we're still doing. We're really saying innovation at no cost, and there always is a cost to that. So that's really fascinating. I want to go though, there is a role for the consumer. Like I think there's so much hating on the farmer, you know what I mean? And farmers have a role in this. The big corporates have a role in this, but what is the role of consumers in this? And I think when I talk about our work, which is, honestly, primarily about the localization of agriculture, saying, hey, local food has additional value than importing food. You have no idea where it came from, right? And so I sort of say, if there's one thing, whenever I'm speaking at events, one thing you can do as a consumer is just take one more moment and realize that every dollar you spend is a vote. It's your vote. And when you buy a product, whatever it is, you're voting that you say you want more of that product. And that is the power that we have as consumers. Is it a similar thing here? And are there certifications? Are there things that people should be looking for? What are some things that we can do as consumers
Mhm.
to support and encourage, humane treatment of animals?
Yeah. Well, let me just say that I do consider farming to be a very noble profession, and I think that the purposes of farming are laudatory. I mean, we can't survive without it. I mean, I
Yeah.
personally don't want to go back to a hunting and gathering strategy. So agriculture was an incredible human innovation, and it's delivered, so much good, but it can go awry. And I think that if you subordinate all of your values to production, production's a very fine and important value, and in our economy, we need that, especially if we have 340 million people in the U.S. and then we're also feeding hundreds of millions of people abroad. We need productivity, but we also can't sacrifice our values on animal welfare, environmental protection, labor issues, farmer well-being and security. All of those things are of great concern. So that's where the consumer comes in, because in the marketplace, there's the dynamism between the producer and the consumer. And I really advocate for conscious consumers in thinking about your food choices. And you have a really distinct moral question when it comes to eating meat, dairy, and eggs. I mean, these are products that come from living animals. And science tells us that animals feel pain in the same way as human beings. They're sensate or they're sentient beings. If you ascribe to the idea of human evolution, natural selection as the mechanism of evolution, we come from other animals. We're made of the same sort of sinew and bone and nerve endings. So there's a moral question. And, should we be killing animals just for gustatory preference because we prefer the taste? Does that taste override our moral concern for the functioning and well-being of individual beings whose lives matter to them as much as ours matter to us? And should custom and should the force of past cultural conduct drive our decision making? Or should it be grounded on rationality? Should it be grounded on science? Should it be grounded on our expansion of moral concern? I mean, we used to have a very limited moral concern for propertied, men, and that led to a lot of moral questions that we dealt with in our industrial era and in the age of, after the French Revolution. So I would say that not to be too weighty about it. I mean, these are very consequential moral choices that we face at the restaurant and the supermarket every day. And I think we should bring some of that thinking to our decision making. And generally we know that a whole foods plant-based diet is better for our health, right? There's less incidence of heart disease, less in the form of cancer. There is a cornucopia of food products out there. Before I became, very alert to these issues, I had a standard American diet. I mean, very narrow in terms of the types of foods. When I became, more focused on these decisions, a much larger world of foods opened up to me. It was, tremendous flowering of of thought for me in terms of foods and food products. So I mean, I don't think that I don't have a single prescription for people, but I would say be a conscious consumer, eat more plant-based foods. I mean, I think Michael Pollan said it in The Omnivore's Dilemma: eat food, um, you know, mostly plants, not too much, right? I mean, and we have an obesity crisis in this country, a heart disease crisis, we have a cancer crisis. There are multiple explanations, but food is at the center of so many of those problems.
Yeah, so well said, and great reminder of the health benefits in addition to the humane aspects of this. It's an exciting challenge. I think the way you're positioning is great. It's like it's take a moment to think a bit more about, the kind of health you want to have, the kind of consumer you want to be, and we have power in that. I just want to follow up. Is there like a certification or something like we can look for in the
Mhm.
US that's going to signal to us that it's part of one of these programs or that the farmer's doing that? I feel like I've seen some on
Yeah,
consumer products like different fashion products, but I don't think I see them on food so much besides free range, which I
yeah.
think tells apart one story. But is there anything like what would we look for?
It's certainly the organic standard now has legal standards of care for animals. It
Okay.
was a rulemaking that was finally passed during the Biden administration. It should have happened many years before. It waited way too long. And Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack was very laggard in dealing with the issue. He's a creature of big agribusiness, and he was a dairy industry CEO between his stints as agriculture secretary and didn't bring any passion to the issue of animal welfare. Finally, it happened in the Biden administration. It's called the Organic Livestock and Poultry Protection Standards. And it stipulates that if you buy organic products, in the meat case, that animals, were not confined in crates, that were not subject to certain mutilation practices, they had access to pasture. So there are some multiple standards. There are multiple standards for animal welfare. There are some certification programs, but they're very spotty,
Mhm.
and they're not, often available fully to the consumer. Whole Foods market, as one major national retailer has a step rated system, a 1 through 5 plus system, and each of those steps has multiple metrics for animal welfare. So the baseline, the lowest standard, but still better than conventional, is no cages and crates.
Mhm.
2 might be no mutilation. 3 might be access to pasture. 5 plus maybe they live entirely outdoors if they wish to be out, right? And they get protection
Mhm.
from the elements when they need it. So there are, it's spotty at this point, and that's why the consumer has to be guided by his or her own conscience. And you just don't have a lot of confidence in a lot of these products that are in the major supermarkets. I mean, we just don't know exactly what the standards are because there are no legal standards um, other than the organic standards. And the United States has no federal laws to protect animals on the farm. Not at all.
No rights for them. Um, Thank you so much for that. Just to wrap things up here, is there anything else that you want to share with our audience today? Any other information? Any other is there other petitions or things that people should be joining? Things that are happening soon? Votes, bills?
Yeah.
What's coming next that we need to act on this topic?
Yeah. I would say in general, I just want to underscore that when we do show a regard for animals, it spills over to better outcomes for the whole of society. I mean, animals are considered protein factories in reverse. We give them a lot of feed crops like corn and soybeans, other crops, and they inefficiently turn those feed crops into animal flesh. And if we ate plants directly, we could go a lot farther. It takes 12 pounds of corn to produce 1 pound of beef, or
And not to mention the water, which we talk
yeah,
about,
and then there's the water. There's all of the
land
we
degradation.
yeah, we have we our waste is treated for 340 million Americans. What about the 10 billion animals raised? Their waste isn't treated at all.
Right, and it's
Going into
contaminating.
streams.
It's contaminating. We do a
Yeah,
lot of lettuce production. It's contaminating lettuce across Arizona. Most food unsafe product, partially because they're close to these very dense farm lots, these feed lots.
yeah.
This
So I
is
would
it's a
say one
serious
way
issue.
that
It's a
people,
serious
yeah,
issue. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of individual choice, but then there's also the importance of collective action. That's why organizations like Animal Wellness Action, the Center for Humane Economy exists to aggregate people of shared purpose to influence business and government. Those are the two big levers of change, and that's what we work on at Animal Wellness Action, the Center for Humane Economy. And I would invite people to check out our websites at animalwellnessaction.org and centerforahumaneeconomy.org and see the work that's going on. And if it inspires you, become part of it. I think that there are very few opportunities that exist in the world to make a bigger difference than helping animals. Billions of animals are at risk. I mean, we are raising 70 to 100 billion animals a year, terrestrial animals, for food every year. There are billions and billions of fish that are killed, wild animals for the most part, or in aquaculture, which is kind of a factory farming
Yeah.
system in the oceans. So, and that's just one piece of the overall human relationship to animals, which has many different manifestations. And I just think it's a hugely important moral question that not enough of us are really delving into. If we're serious-minded people, we've got to think about this question on how we relate to the rest of the animal kingdom. There are more than 1 million species on this planet. Are we going to be merciful, or are we going to be malicious? And I vote for merciful.
Such an interesting conversation, and I learned so much today. In Agritecture, we're trying to amplify diverse voices about the future of food. So really appreciate your time today, Wayne. Definitely, if you're watching, think about this. Take a moment to think about this. I'm going to. What kind of consumer are you? What kind of consumer do you want to be? And how can you encourage your friends and family and team members? So thank you for your time, Wayne. Please reach out to Wayne and check out Animal Wellness Action. And thank you so much.
Have a great day. Thank you for having me on, Henry.